Well, good morning, everybody. Jeff Slakey here on Daybreak, and I've got a great guest in studio here today. She is running for the U.S. Senate here in the great state of Washington, Susan Hutchison. Hello, how are you?
I'm great, Jeff. Thanks so much for having me here.
Thanks for coming into Shelton, and you're getting out, seeing the whole state, talking with all sorts of folks.
I am. You know, our state is geographically very diverse.
Yeah.
And the people are so wonderful, but they all have different interests and concerns, depending upon where they live and what they do. So it's really wonderful for me to be able to interact and learn from them, listen to what they have to say.
One of the big things, if voters in November send you to the District of Columbia, you're going to be working very closely with the other Senate Republicans, also with President Trump in the party. And so first things first, let's talk about just your agenda similarities, what you support with President Trump's agenda, and some ways that you may differ with him.
Well, you know, I think it's high time that this state have a Republican senator.
It's been a while.
We're split down the middle as far as Republican and Democrat. You see it in the legislature where it's really cut in half. In fact, Republicans could gain one more seat in each of the chambers. We'd run the entire legislature. Mm-hmm. That's not the definition of a blue state. Mm-hmm. We're a purple state, and I think it's high time that we had a Republican be part of the majority party back in the halls of power and be able to speak to the president. Maria Cantwell won't talk to him. She's a resist, obstruct kind of person. And so it doesn't serve us well in the nation's capital that they don't have respect for this state. We are deserving of a great deal more respect. We're huge, for starters, not only geographically, but population-wise. We're the 12th largest electoral state in the country. And so we're often not noticed, and we should be.
And one of the other things that you'll likely have the opportunity to do if you're elected is vote for the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it might happen before I arrive in the U.S. Senate. I hope it does. But in any case, if the president has any other positions to fill on the U.S. Supreme Court, I think he's been very clear that he's kept to his promise that he would appoint justices who really believe in the Constitution, will uphold the Constitution, understand the division of powers, that judges are not legislators. We have an entire body that can get that work done, and that the judges need to be like Lady Justice, blindfolded, and take each case for its merits based on the Constitution.
Let's go to some local issues with trades and tariffs, and we export, from gooey duck to shellfish and strawberries, the whole gambit. What are your thoughts on the current trade talks? Recently, the president and President Peña down in Mexico have perhaps come up with a tentative agreement on a new Mexico-America trade deal, United States trade deal. Those types of things, and then the tariff talk. It seems that there's a little uncertainty with the growers out there. Are you hearing that out there?
Yes, I've talked with farmers at length in eastern Washington about the tariffs and the trade wars. And of course, they're concerned, but they will point out, as they have to me, that basically all of these problems came long before Donald Trump became president. Okay. And the Chinese have levied tariffs against us for way too long. So they yearn for a level playing field, and they commend the president for playing hardball in trying to get more fair trade deals. So we want free trade. We also want fair trade. And I think that's what the president is after. But all of them have just a short period of time when this needs to be done. But I tell you, I used to say when I was chairman of the state GOP, I said, we are now living life at the speed of Trump. Yeah. And he seems to be able to get things done really quickly. I mean, he's a business operator after all. And in business, time is money. And so he understands that fully. And I expect that we're going to have an agreement with Canada, just as we have an agreement with Mexico. Maybe the three countries will combine, and then certainly China won't be far behind because China's economy is in trouble. They are not sitting where the U.S. economy is sitting right now. We're in a prosperity boom that probably is historic. We've probably never seen anything like it before, and that's a wonderful place to be negotiating from.
A lot of folks will say that some of the recent tax cuts in Congress helps spur this economy that we're seeing now. What are some of the ways the people out there in the state or you're hearing it, that they benefit from the tax cuts?
Well, you're absolutely right. The tax cuts sort of set it off. And again, the president kept to his promise that he was going to do something about this stagnant economy that we had had for the previous 8 years. And it's very obvious. And the stock market has responded in a positive way. You always know when people put their money where their thinking is, then it's a good sign. But I think that all around the state, one of the things that I love to see is low unemployment for our ethnic communities, the Hispanics, the blacks, even youth. You know, I'm the mom of 2 sons. They're now in their mid-20s, but every mom of sons knows that we don't want idle teens,
Right.
Young adults, because they get in trouble. You know, they need to be working. They need to be moving into the workforce, learning how hard it is to hold a job and learning those skills for those entry-level positions so that they'll be ready for the next job and the next job and, you know, their final careers. But this is all really good news for all of us. It's good for our communities. You know, the thing that's so good about jobs is that they give people dignity. Even the most minimal job, when that paycheck comes, it feels really good, and that's your money. And so we get dignity, and that dignity gives people hope. They begin to be able to plan for their families and for their own livelihoods, for their futures. And so on my signs that you see all over, they say she's fighting for our future. That's really what it's about. It's not just right now, but it's also for what the next years are going to be, not only for us, but for our kids and our grandkids.
Speaking of kids, before too long, kids are heading back to school. Teachers are in the classrooms. Some teachers, though, heading to the picket lines. What are your thoughts on the current negotiations between the school districts and the union here in the state? And how much role should the federal government have in local state education?
Well, I think the federal government has the role of being able to sort of be a clearinghouse at the national level of all the best reforms that have come down the pike. You know, we are ready for an education revolution, and there are a lot of very good thinkers on that subject right here in Washington State. I'm proud to know a number of them, and I've enjoyed being briefed by them about some of the things that we need to do to improve. We certainly support our teachers. I've been involved in education at the public school level ever since my kids were little. They've gone through public schools, and I worked in their classrooms as a volunteer. I was also appointed by Governor Locke to the Governor's A+ Commission on Education, and in that process learned a great deal. And I think that our teachers are the experience I've had is we had terrific teachers in our school system. Mm-hmm. And so I think most of us really believe in our teachers. And so I want them to have the best deal possible. I want our teaching colleges to turn out the best people imaginable to teach our kids. And so I hope that the differences get worked out within the various districts that are having some problems right now. But also the Supreme Court ruled, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled about a month ago that teachers no longer have to pay the union. Right. If they're public employees, they are no longer forced to be a member of the union and to pay those dues. And so we're in a transition period, and I know the unions are concerned because it's going to take a tremendous amount of money out of their wallets that they use for political purposes. And I'm glad about that, because I don't think our public employees need to be turning over parts of their paycheck to unions that are totally one-sided when it comes to how they spend political dollars.
Your video in front of the smoky backdrop seemed to go viral.
It sure did.
What did you learn when you talked with Forestry Service personnel and scientists and things like that about how things are happening around here?
Well, that surprised us too. I videotaped that within 10 minutes. The backdrop was the smoky sky in Seattle. Yeah. And I talked about this issue that my opponent says, forest fires, that's about global warming. Well, the truth is that we can fix it. There's actually solutions right now to fixing this problem that the people in Eastern Washington have lived with for many years, and those of us in Western Washington have experienced the last 2 summers, and that is that we have to have better forest management. We've got to clean up the underbrush, the tinder, that the kindling, you might call it, that is there ready to burn, just dry as can be. And then we have to have intelligent logging. You know, our logging companies, our timber companies know exactly how to log to prevent these kind of conflagrations. We're talking about out of control fires.
Yeah.
We know fires, you can't stop them from starting if it's a natural cause, but they don't have to turn into these burns that destroy so much forest, destroy wildlife, and really put human beings and property at tremendous risk. So this is solutions-based policy, and that's what I would bring to the table. I'm about fixing things and solving problems, and my opponent says with a flourish, oh, it's global warming, as if there's nothing we can do. Well, there is something we can do, and we need to do it in our federal lands.
So that's with state lands, private businesses, and federal lands all working together to...
Absolutely. You know, that is the key. Collaboration going forward is the key to the success of this state and really the nation. The divisions in the country right now based on politics are really unnecessary. And I think that with the proper leadership, which I would like to provide as your U.S. Senator, I think we can get things done. I know that my opponent is part of that group that doesn't want to get anything done. They just want to use all of these problems as hammers, either to raise taxes, to solve, and I put that in quotes, problems, which only grow government bigger, or they just want to use them in campaigns. So there are any number of issues that are sitting there on the table because the other side is unwilling to solve problems.
You're in Seattle. You've spent time out in Grays Harbor, here in Shelton now, and from big to small cities all around the state, you see an increase with the opioid epidemic and homelessness. There's a business in Olympia that's getting ready to close down because of the homeless problem and them kind of coming into the area. Where are the solutions? What are some enforcement solutions that you can think of and work with your fellow senator colleagues to fix this finally?
Well, you know, it always starts usually with a prescription for an opioid for pain that goes into an abusive situation where people become addicted and then can no longer get their prescription filled and have to turn to the underground in order to get these drugs. And one of the issues, and it seems like issues seem to dovetail with each other, but one of the biggest issues in our polling in the state is immigration. And what people see it as is a national security issue, and that in fact the multi-billion-dollar drug cartels are putting these drugs through the porous border and getting them into our communities. And it's so tragic. There are so many families, and I've known a couple who've had deaths due to opioid addiction, which then becomes an overdose. There's nothing more tragic because it's usually younger people that this happens to. And so I am in favor of every initiative we can take to limit the prescriptions for opioids to just those who need them and just for a very short period of time, not filling the bottle like they tend to do. And from there, making sure that we keep out these terrible drug cartels that really are like a business. They do market research just the way Walmart would if they're wanting to put in a store nearby. They come in and check out which communities they'll have the best opportunity in. And I tell you, a lot of those communities are our rural communities where there are no jobs. And it goes back to no job, no dignity, no hope. So when you have no hope, you often turn to something that'll take away that pain. And so my heart goes out to all of those that suffer with addiction, and certainly that has a great deal to do with the growth in the homelessness problem that we're seeing all over Western Washington, but particularly in my city, which is Seattle, the one I've lived in for almost 4 decades.
They've been working, having multiple conversations, going down different routes on ways to either raise money to get more affordable housing or more treatment options. What are the solutions in Seattle? It just seems not out of control because it can be fixed, but it's close.
Well, there are a number of reasons for homelessness, and the most important thing is to define what those reasons are, because I'm not interested in treating symptoms. I'm interested in curing it. And so the first one is domestic violence, where a mother flees with her children, and we've got wonderful organizations, both government and nonprofit, that work in our urban areas to provide safe shelter for them. Another is just being down on your luck. And so, from time to time, you lose your house, you get yourself in debt, you lose the ability to fend for yourself. And we need that safety net. And again, there are a number of government programs and nonprofits that help people. And oftentimes it's all about work skills and the ability to hang on to jobs, to be persevering, to show up every day and have those job skills that we try to train into our young people all the way into the rest of their lives. The final two are the ones that are really the problem right now in downtown Seattle and throughout our metropolitan areas, and that is drug addiction and mental illness. And I think mental illness is one of those issues whose time has come. The recent shootings, every single one of them is tied to a young person who has severe mental illness, and the fact that so many times they are reported to authorities and the authorities don't do anything, and in fact the gun checks don't pick up on it. We've got lots of gun laws in place that should be picking up on these issues, but it's the blinders that we have on our society right now toward mental illness that prevents that kind of communication to occur. Where I think we are in for, and I would be happy to lead this because I've seen it. I used to do the news years ago, for about 20 years on Cairo TV in Seattle, and a lot of your listeners were my viewers. And you learn about the problems that plague America and plague our community, and you realize how much mental health has to do with it. I think it's tough in modern society for a lot of people to thrive, and so they need help. They need what the medical profession has to offer in way of help for them to get on a steady path and lead healthy lives. And we just have to stop ignoring it as a problem and tackle it. And I can do that. I understand mental illness, and I want. I think almost every family has somebody who's struggling, whether it's with depression or addiction or some other form, even psychosis. So we can do this. We can do this as a community. And we've got to get the people that are homeless. It's not just about providing them shelter, although you need that as a start. But you've got to be able to deal with the addiction. We want to cure the addiction. We don't want to just provide shelter for these people to remain addicted. And then the mental health issues, for sure. They don't just need shelter so that they can remain condemned to mental illness. We've got to fix the root cause, and then people will have the freedom and the ability to be on their own.
Tell us one more time again how you would differ from the current Senator Cantwell in this seat if folks elect you in November.
Well, I think the first thing is that I'm here, and I doubt that Maria Cantwell has stepped foot in the Shelton area in a very, very long time. She is a senator for the entire state, and everywhere I go outside of Seattle, people say, we never see her. We never see her. And that's her fault. She's paid a good amount of money by taxpayers to represent them. That's everybody. Republicans and Democrats deserve her to pay attention to them. And so I've challenged her to a series of 10 debates in the 10 congressional districts, which means she would have to get out and get to know her constituents in all the corners of the state. They're all equal in size, so none of them are more important than any other. And I think it would be just a great way. We don't have to follow a standard debate format. We could do town halls, we could do audience participation, anything so that people can hear where she stands on the issues. If you ask Maria Cantwell where she stands on just about any issue, you can't get an answer. You just don't know because she avoids taking stands. And that's not what we need either. We need a leader representing our state in the legislative body called the Congress, and the Senate is a major body of that Congress. And so I look forward to serving everybody. And believe me, when I'm elected, I'll be back in this area a lot.
She's running and looking for your vote this November. U.S. Senate candidate Susan Hutchison. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.